Click. That's the sound of a padlock snapping shut on my own gate. The crunch of gravel under boots as hired security walks away, leaving me trapped on my own property like a prisoner. Picture this. You're a stubborn 58-year-old widower who's fought for this land his whole life, minding your own business on property your grandfather left you. Then Victoria, with her clipboard and smug grin, brands your cabin unfit and literally locks you inside your own community. Big mistake. See, what Victoria and her cronies didn't bother to research was that weathered concrete bridge everyone uses to get in and out, the sole lifeline connecting 47 fancy homes to the outside world. Yeah, I own that, every square inch. What would you do if neighbors locked you on your own land? My name is Ezra Blackwood, and 6 months ago my wife Margaret died after 40 years of marriage, leaving me with a hole in my chest the size of Colorado. I packed up our Denver suburban life and moved to my grandfather's old cabin in Pine Ridge Estates up in the mountains. 47 fancy homes dot the mountainside, all linked to the world by one concrete bridge. My concrete bridge, though I didn't know that yet. Most residents are weekend warriors or retirees, playing mountain man with designer flannel. We had an informal HOA that handled snow plowing. Then enter Victoria Thornfield, 52, recently relocated from Denver with her smug lawyer husband Marcus and entitled son Bradley, who eyed my land like a prize. Within 6 months, Victoria had engineered herself into HOA president with one mission: elevating community standards, which meant clearing out anyone who didn't fit her suburban fantasies. The click of her designer heels on my wooden porch announced her first visit. I was sitting in my grandfather's old rocking chair, coffee in hand, when she arrived. Cream-colored pantsuit, leather portfolio, Bradley smirking behind her like this was all some game. Behind them I could see the turquoise waters of the lake reflecting the mountain peaks, a view my family had cherished for generations. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, skipping pleasantries, pointing at my cabin like it personally offended her. "I'm here about your property compliance issues." I looked around my grandfather's 40 acres, hand-built log cabin, workshop, where 3 generations had fixed everything from tractors to heartbreak, gardens that had fed our family since the 1940s. "What issues?" She flipped open that portfolio, like a prosecutor presenting evidence at trial. "Your cabin needs fresh paint. The workshop is an eyesore. Those gardens are inappropriate for a community of this caliber. Frankly, the entire aesthetic is dragging down property values." My old dog wandered over, tail wagging, completely unaware of the tension. Listening to this woman insult 3 generations of my family's work, standing on my porch, pointing at me like I was some vagrant, made my blood boil. This cabin has been in my family for 80 years. My grandfather built it with his own hands. My father raised me here. You want me to change it because it doesn't match your suburban fantasies? Victoria's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Mr. Blackwood, we all have sentimental attachments, but progress requires sacrifice. I'm sure you understand." Behind her I could see her police escort waiting by their vehicle, a power move she'd clearly planned. "I understand perfectly. The answer is no." She closed the portfolio with a snap that echoed across the mountain silence. Bradley chuckled behind her. "We'll see about that." 2 weeks later, an official envelope appeared. Anonymous complaints with Jefferson County about unpermitted structures. The county inspector, a nervous kid who kept apologizing, explained every building needed current permits and architectural surveys. $3,200 in fees for permits on buildings that had stood longer than most Pine Ridge residents had been alive. Victoria's first shot. But the Blackwood family doesn't roll over for bullies. My grandfather fought claim jumpers in these mountains. Victoria Thornfield had just picked a fight with the wrong man. Victoria didn't waste time. 3 days after I wrote that check, she struck again, bringing a surveyor, her brother-in-law naturally, to re-establish property boundaries. I was drinking my morning coffee when I heard surveying equipment cutting through the mountain silence. Through my kitchen window, I watched Victoria's brother-in-law set up his transit on what I knew was my land. "Morning, mind telling me what you're doing on my property?" Victoria's brother-in-law had the surveying skills of a drunk GPS, and twice the arrogance. "We're resurveying community green space. Seems there's been confusion about boundaries." "No confusion here. My property line runs 20 feet past that oak tree. Been that way since 1943. Within hours, he discovered my property line was mysteriously 20 feet smaller. By next afternoon, a crew was installing an 8-foot privacy fence, not on the disputed line, but 15 feet onto my land, right through my family's grazing pasture where sheep had wandered for decades. The fence blocked my hiking trail and positioned itself to kill my workshop's morning sunlight. I stood there in my hat and sweater, watching them drive posts into ground my grandfather had cleared with his own hands, sheep bleating nervously in the background. Victoria appeared with 2 police officers, pointing at me across the green pasture like I was trespassing on my own land. "Officers, this man has been encroaching on community property for years. I need this documented. The absurdity was stunning. Standing in a field my family had owned since before she was born, being accused of theft by a woman who'd arrived 6 months ago. Mrs. Holloway appeared with coffee and worry. "This isn't right, Ezra. That fence is clearly on your land. We're with you, honey." Then she glanced nervously toward Victoria's house and hurried away like she was afraid of being seen consorting with the enemy. I called Becker and Associates, the county's most respected surveying firm. Tom Becker himself had surveyed half the properties in Jefferson County. Cost me $800, money I didn't really have, but by Friday I had ironclad proof Victoria's fence sat 15 feet inside my property line. But here's where my 40 years of engineering kicked in. When you've spent your career building bridges, dams, and roads, you learn the devil lives in old documentation everyone forgets about. Infrastructure has memory, and that memory lives in county courthouses. Saturday morning, I spent hours in my grandfather's file boxes. Documents I hadn't touched since moving here revealed genuine treasure. Grandpa's original 1943 mining claim, complete with an exclusive easement for bridge and road maintenance, the only way in or out of Pine Ridge. Monday at the courthouse confirmed what those yellow documents suggested. Every legal filing since 1978 referred to the current concrete bridge as sitting on an existing private easement granted by E. Blackwood estate. The bridge everyone took for granted, the one connecting all 47 fancy homes to civilization, that was mine. I owned the bridge. Victoria called an emergency HOA meeting for Tuesday night, demanding $500 monthly fines for my ongoing illegal encroachment. Most residents sat silent, half terrified of becoming her next target, half simply absent to avoid taking sides. "Mr. Blackwood has been trespassing on community green space for years," she announced with authority. "His illegal encroachment must be corrected immediately with monthly penalties until compliance." My hands shook slightly as I stood, not from fear, but from controlling my temper. My voice stayed rock steady. "Victoria, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I walked to the front, pulling out my independent survey and spreading it on the table. This survey, conducted by Becker and Associates, people who actually know how to use surveying equipment, shows your fence is 15 feet onto my property. Victoria's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "That's impossible. What's impossible is how your brother-in-law got his surveying license." Crackerjack box. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Victoria slammed her laptop shut so hard I thought she'd crack the screen. "The community has voted 7-2. You have 30 days to comply or face escalating daily fines." I nodded calmly and headed for the door, then turned back with the kind of smile that had made opposing contractors nervous for 4 decades. "Victoria, you might want to check who actually owns that bridge you drove over to get here tonight. Spoiler alert, it's not the HOA." The look of confusion and dawning horror on her face was worth every penny of those permit fees. Victoria's response was swift and petty. First came the mailbox war. My hand-carved wooden mailbox didn't meet community standards. I needed an approved model from Mountain Vista Landscaping, owned by Bradley, for $340. I built a masterpiece that exceeded every requirement for $30. Victoria's reaction? Wood wasn't professional enough. Then garbage pickup mysteriously skipped my house. The driver pulled me aside. Lady called my boss. Made threats about our contract. "I'm sorry, man." Then came firewood harassment. Fire Marshal Rodriguez inspected my neat cords. "This is the cleanest woodpile in the county. Someone's using my department for revenge." But Victoria overplayed her hand, spreading rumors at Murphy's Diner, loud enough for Sarah Chen, a property rights attorney, to overhear. Sarah called that afternoon. "Mr. Blackwood, I couldn't help noticing concerning harassment patterns. Want to discuss legal options?" While Victoria played dictator, I was building a case. Every interaction documented with military precision. I requested 5 years of HOA meeting minutes, discovering Victoria's greatest hits. The Kowalskis harassed until they fled. Mrs. Patterson tortured until assisted living. The Garcias months of harassment until they sold at a loss. Victoria was a serial property predator. The real bombshell came when Sarah dug into that bridge maintenance contract. County records showed $180,000 annually going to Pine Ridge Community Infrastructure LLC for bridge upkeep. Want to guess who owned that LLC? Victoria. For 15 years, she'd been stealing my bridge maintenance money. $2.7 million plus interest, plus the satisfaction of knowing I could legally shut down her entire scam with one phone call. Victoria's panic showed when she called another meeting, proposing to buy out my problematic property for exactly $3,000. Mrs. Holloway marched in like storming Normandy. "This harassment has to stop. Ezra Blackwood is a good man." Victoria's mask slipped. "Mrs. Holloway, perhaps you don't understand what's at stake." "I understand bullying perfectly," the old woman fired back. Jake Morrison caught my arm after. "Ezra, whatever you're planning, I'm in." Victoria's next move proved she'd completely lost her mind. Monday morning, I woke to the sound of construction. By noon, Pine Ridge had its very own electronic gate system, complete with keypads, cameras, and a guard shack that looked like it belonged at Guantanamo Bay. Victoria stood beside it, directing workers like Napoleon deploying cannons. I returned from a supply run to find myself locked out. My access code mysteriously expired. The gate's red light blinked at me like a robotic middle finger, and the intercom crackled. "Sorry, sir, system error. Gonna take several days. Maybe call the HOA president." This wasn't harassment anymore. Victoria had turned my home into Alcatraz, and I was the only prisoner. Mrs. Holloway rolled down her window. "Ezra, this is criminal. I'm calling that woman right now." "Don't worry. She just handed me a felony case on a silver platter." Deputy Martinez arrived within an hour, took one look at the gate blocking my driveway, and started shaking his head. "Ma'am, you can't imprison a property owner on his own land. That's false imprisonment, and it's a felony. Open the gate now." The turquoise lake water sparkled below us, mountains rising on all sides, as she marched toward me. "You think you're so smart, Blackwood? You think you can blackmail this community?" Her voice echoed across the water. "This isn't blackmail, Victoria. This is justice." I held up the Becker & Associates survey report. "This bridge needs $400,000 in repairs. Repairs you've been collecting money for, but never performing. Want to explain where that money went?" Her face went from red to purple. "Those are lies. That survey is fraudulent." Tom Becker stepped forward, calm and professional. "Ma'am, I've been surveying in Jefferson County for 30 years. This bridge is a safety hazard, and the maintenance records show zero work performed despite annual payments to your company." Victoria lunged forward, finger jabbing toward me like a weapon. "You're trying to steal from this community. You're trying to hold us hostage with lies about bridge ownership." The deputies exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable. "Victoria," I said quietly, "I have 80 years of documentation proving my family owns this bridge. You have 15 years of stolen maintenance payments. Who's really stealing from who?" She stepped closer on that bridge, the confrontation reaching its peak with mountains and lake as witnesses. "I will destroy you, Blackwood. I will take everything you have. This community will choose me over some grieving old fool living in a shack." That's when Deputy Martinez intervened. "Ma'am, I think we need to have a conversation at the station about these financial irregularities." Victoria whirled on him. "Are you seriously taking his side? Do you know who my husband is? Do you know what connections I have?" Martinez sighed. "Ma'am, having connections doesn't make fraud legal." The breaking point came at our lakeside community area, the pristine waters and mountain backdrop making the scene almost surreal. Victoria had called a community gathering by the Pine Ridge Estates sign, probably hoping the beautiful setting would somehow validate her lies. I showed up with Sarah Chen and our evidence boxes. Victoria stood there in her designer suit, pointing at me across the rocks and beach grass. "This man wants to destroy our community. He wants to close our bridge and trap us here like prisoners." I let her finish her performance before I spoke. "Victoria, you keep talking about community. Let me tell you what I discovered about your commitment to this community." I pulled out financial records. "You've been stealing from these people for 15 years. Every snow removal contract, every landscaping bill, every legal fee, all inflated by your family members. You've stolen $3.5 million from your neighbors, while living in a mansion built with their money." The crowd gasped. Victoria's composure finally cracked completely. "Those are lies fabricated by a bitter old man who can't accept change." "Then explain," Sarah Chen stepped forward, "why the Colorado Department of Transportation has opened a criminal investigation into your company. Explain why your husband filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. Explain why Bradley's business accounts are frozen by the IRS." Victoria looked around at the community she'd terrorized, standing against the backdrop of pristine lake and mountains, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. She was trapped, and she knew it. Tuesday morning brought a manila envelope. Sarah Chen's forensic accountant had uncovered everything. Every improvement project over 8 years had been inflated, falsified, or completely fictional. Total theft: $847,000 from community funds, plus $2.7 million in bridge payments. But here's where Sarah hit pay dirt. Buried in 1962 property records, my grandfather's original 40 acres had included Victoria's current lot. He'd lost it in a poker game to her late father-in-law. Family legend said Grandpa suspected cheating. Victoria had known about my bridge ownership from day one. Her entire campaign wasn't about community standards. It was revenge for a 60-year-old poker game wrapped in the biggest HOA theft in Colorado history. Wednesday morning transformed my workshop into a war room. Sarah Chen arrived with evidence. My team: Sarah, property rights attorney; Miguel Santos, forensic accountant and former FBI investigator; Rebecca Stone, civil rights lawyer working pro bono; and retired Judge Hamilton Gray, my old Army buddy. Maps covered one wall. Financial flowcharts showing Victoria's money laundering covered another. "This isn't just about your bridge anymore," Rebecca said. "Victoria's created a textbook RICO case. Federal racketeering charges. The financial strategy was devastating. She owes you $2.7 million in bridge payments, plus the community's $847,000 in embezzled funds, plus triple damages for fraud. We're talking north of $8 million in total liability. Mrs. Holloway weaponized her bridge club network. These women have been suspicious for years. Victoria's designer wardrobe while we're paying emergency assessments. We just needed someone with backbone to fight. Maria Rodriguez brought photos of Victoria's landscaping scam. She fined us for hanging laundry outside. Called it unsightly. This from a woman stealing our money for plastic surgery. The media strategy was perfect. Reporter Kate Morrison was documenting the biggest municipal fraud case in Colorado history. Denver TV stations sent crews. Victoria's political protection evaporated. Friday night, the Pine Ridge Community Center looked like a public execution. 200 people packed in. Regional TV crews set up. Sheriff's deputies positioned strategically. Victoria arrived late in her Lexus, wearing her most expensive cream suit, apparently believing she could still control the narrative. Ladies and gentlemen, I've called this meeting to address malicious attacks against your elected leadership. The crowd erupted. Where's our money? Thief! Mrs. Rodriguez stood holding her evidence packet. Victoria, we know about everything. That's enough. My voice cut through the chaos. The room fell silent as I stood with my manila folder. Sarah Chen wheeled in evidence boxes. Miguel Santos set up the projector. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about a bridge. I pulled out my grandfather's 1943 mining claim. This deed proves my family has owned the bridge, connecting Pine Ridge to the outside world for 81 years. Gasps rippled through the audience. Victoria's face went from confident to horrified in 3 seconds. For 15 years, the Colorado Department of Transportation has been paying bridge maintenance fees to Pine Ridge Community Infrastructure, LLC. That's Victoria's shell company. She's been stealing money that legally belongs to me. $2.7 million. The projector showed financial documents. The crowd roared. But that's not all. Mrs. Thornfield has been running a criminal enterprise disguised as community improvement. Every project, every contract, designed to funnel your money into her family's pockets. Miguel stepped forward. Total theft from community funds, $847,000 over 8 years. Victoria tried to interrupt. These are fabricated. Ma'am. Sheriff Martinez stepped forward with handcuffs gleaming. You have the right to remain silent. I'd suggest using it. The room erupted in applause as Martinez read Victoria her rights. Criminal charges, embezzlement, fraud, bribery, filing false police reports, and racketeering. The metallic click of handcuffs closing around Victoria's wrists was the sweetest sound I'd heard since Margaret's laughter. You can't do this. I'll fight this. I'll appeal. Victoria, I called out. You might want to save your energy. You're gonna need a really good lawyer. County Commissioner Walsh announced immediate dissolution of Victoria's board. Mr. Blackwood, what are your intentions regarding bridge access? I stood, looking at neighbors who'd suffered. The bridge will remain open, but Pine Ridge will purchase proper ownership for fair market value. $50,000. That money goes directly into a community scholarship fund. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. 1 month later, Victoria stood in court wearing orange. She pleaded guilty rather than face trial. Judge Hamilton Gray showed no mercy. 3 years in state prison, $3.5 million in restitution, 500 hours community service. Marcus fled to Denver. Bradley worked minimum wage. Children's laughter now filled where Victoria's mansion stood. The community purchased the foreclosed property and converted it into Pine Ridge's first public park. The bridge renovation became the greatest community project. Residents volunteered weekends. The new HOA board implemented competitive bidding, public records, and actual citizen participation. Projects Victoria priced at $50,000 were completed for $8,000. Property values increased 15%. My grief-induced isolation gave way to leadership. The workshop became a community center. Mrs. Holloway's widowed sister Sarah and I had been spending time together, sharing stories about loss and second chances. The ripple effects spread beyond our mountain. Bridgegate became a case study in law schools. The Colorado legislature passed the Pine Ridge Act, requiring HOA audits and background checks. Other communities began calling for advice. Documentary filmmaker Rebecca Martinez optioned our story. The advance-funded scholarships that sent 3 kids to college. Victoria's theft inadvertently funded the next generation's education. The mountain air carried sounds of a healthy community as I sat on my porch watching sunset paint the peaks gold. My phone rang with a call from Arizona about similar HOA corruption. Mrs. Holloway, now democratically elected president, stopped by with apple pie. Ezra, that Arizona community needs you. We've got things handled here. I looked at the bridge spanning the valley, properly maintained and honestly governed. What do you think, Margaret? I whispered to the mountain wind. The answer came in children playing in Victoria's former garden, laughter echoing across water flowing freely under an honest bridge. Time to help another community learn that sometimes the little guy wins when they fight smart instead of angry. Share your HOA nightmare story below. Your experience might help someone else fight back. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people standing up to corrupt authority. Because sometimes justice wears work boots and carries surveying equipment.